Yeah, for sure. So we're gonna go matchup by matchup. We can start at the bottom or the top, and we can start with Joel Embiid versus Dwight Howard. And let's start at Joel Embiid versus Howard. This one is very interesting because this is one of those things where I test Joel Embiid. I think is a better player than Dwight Howard, right? Mm-hmm. High level shooter for his position, one of the better shooting big men we've ever seen. Yep. Great, mid post game, low post game, and everything. But his peak right now, right? We're in the Joel Embiid prime right now, and if we look at the Joel Embiid prime, right, and then if we compare that to what we saw during Dwight Howard's prime, you have to ask the question: who maximized their prime a lot better? We're in the midst of the Joel Embiid prime and the Dwight Howard prime, where we kind of saw that, I think, from his best years being like 2009 to 2011, and through that. People act like Dwight's career wasn't all that. We saw a finals appearance. We saw an Eastern Conference finals appearance, right? So I think Dwight Howard definitely maximized his best years relative to what we've seen Joel Embiid do over the course of his career.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I actually agree with you. Some people are going to look at the stats and be like, Joel averaged more points, but the time in which they played was kind of different. Like, it was more defensive predicated back when Dwight Howard was in his prime in the early 2010s and late 2000s, whatever the case may be, because he might have just barely averaged 20 points, but he also averaged double rebounds. It was like, I don't know, Joel Embiid was equally probably, would you say, who's the better defensive player?
Dwight Howard.
Dwight Howard, but Joel Embiid is a good defensive player also, but Dwight Howard has 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards, and he led his team to the final. Something Joel Embiid is still struggling to get out the second round.
Yeah.
So I'll probably say, just because I saw Dwight Howard at his peak, even though his stats might not seem as impressive, I can just go off what I just saw.
Yeah.
Basically for him. So I'll probably pick Dwight Howard, honestly.
Yeah, I think when you go player to player, I think offensively Joel Embiid has a bit better game than Dwight Howard, but when you look at just the overall impact for his team, what Dwight Howard could do defensively, he's basically a stalwart down there in the paint, not letting nobody get in. I think Dwight has that better resume going head to head against Joel.
And people have to realize he's well. People are not going to like this, but he spoiled the LeBron versus Kobe.
He did.
Which everybody hates, but that's like something good to put on your resume. Oh, I stopped them from facing each other. Y'all didn't be able to see him and everything like that. He beat LeBron when LeBron was near his prime in the Eastern Conference Finals, so that's impressive in of itself. And he pushed Kobe to the limit, kind of. You want to say that? So
yeah,
it's kind of hard to compare those two, kind of, since they're. I wouldn't say they're. It's kind of crazy that we talk about like early 2010, 2009 is a different era.
Yeah, because the game was different. Like, they played more defense back then, so 20 points back then is kind of equivalent to 25 now, 25, 26.
And what you were asking
about 2008, 2009, like that's 20 years ago. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the game just, like I said, Curry comes in and the game just drastically changes. What's interesting is I think for both these guys, this is going to kind of be a thing with a couple of big men here, is the comp. Dwight Howard, and here's where things get a little interesting. There was never really a point where there was another center that could really match up with Dwight Howard, or at least a guy who we could say, oh, he may be better than Dwight Howard at his position. With Embiid, he had a little bit better comp, right? Especially at his position. I mean, it wasn't all that much better, but he did catch DeMarcus Cousins in his prime. Anthony Davis is the power forward, but he did match up against 80 a number of times. Obviously, we've seen him match up against Joker and things like that. With Dwight Howard, he didn't really have as much comp. So when we get deeper into the, the comparisons and everything, one thing that's going to come up about Dwight, he dominated. Would Dwight Howard have been as dominant maybe in the 90s?
I think so. Yeah. I definitely think so. I think he would have been probably more dominant.
Yeah, for sure. Because the game was kind of similar in the late 2000s, early 2010s than it was in the 90s to me. Like, you didn't need a center to shoot a jump shot or anything. He could just dominate, be the anchor of your defense, dominate inside on the offensive end. He'll be all right. So he'll definitely, He probably average more points, honestly.
I got a hot take.
Yeah.
I feel like if Dwight and Shaq kind of switched careers and Dwight came into the league right when Shaq came in, I think he would have probably had the same impact Shaq had, if not better.
Here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say about Dwight in the 90s. Because I see what you're saying. Here's what I'm going to say about Dwight in the 90s. I think Dwight would get drowned out in the 90s. So if we go down the list, Hakeem Olajuwon. You got prime Hakeem Olajuwon. He won 2 titles in the 90s. You had Patrick Ewing. You had David Robinson. You did catch Shaq in the Orlando days, right? So does Dwight Howard? So now, how many bigs did I just name there? Probably like 4.
Mm-hmm.
So is he better than any of those guys?
Nah, he's not.
I mean, no, but
Yeah.
nah, I wouldn't.
But yeah, but you also have to keep in mind. I don't know like what type of hypotheticals you are talking about, in like specifically. But if you like reverse places or switch places, we already seen Dwight. We already seen Dwight play with Kobe. It didn't work out. You saw Shaq play with Kobe. It worked out pretty well.
I mean, but
so
that
depending
was,
how you want to put that together, I don't know.
Kobe was kind of on the, I wouldn't say on the back burner, but that was some years. That was years.
Yeah.
My thing with Dwight is I just his prime was great. His prime was weird because he never really had any confidence position. Right now, he did eliminate Boston, who obviously was a tough team, and there's KG on that roster. You know, the year he did get that team to the finals, but relative to a lot of bigs in NBA history, tough thing about Dwight is compared to like a Moses Malone or like a Hakeem or David Robinson or a Shaq, he didn't really have to see another dominant big man. Like how many times in the playoffs did Dwight Howard himself have to go match up against another dominant big? David Robinson had to match up against Hakeem. Hakeem had to match up against Patrick Ewing. Hakeem matched up against Shaq.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's my one drawback. Dwight. So relative to Embiid, what Dwight maximized his prime, and again, Embiid's prime isn't over yet, but it's not looking too good from a playoff success standpoint. But I think Dwight Howard maximized prime more. But the only drawback on Dwight Howard is if he gets to a different era where there's more confidence position, does he stand out as much? Is he better than Alonzo Mourning in the 90s?
I'd say yeah.
I think he is.
Same player.
And why I say I think he is because I know Alonzo Mourning and him are probably the same. They probably have the same physique, don't they? Probably. Dwight might be a little bigger. I don't know.
I think honestly, my main reason for making that, kind of my main reason for making that comparison is just physique and athleticism. I think when you talk about Shaq, who would come close to matching up with Shaq athletically, I think Dwight is probably the closest you can get to that.
Yeah.
You see what Shaq was doing back then.
Dwight definitely wouldn't have been able to handle his ass.
Oh no. But that's the thing though. Shaq was obviously he was more physical and he was stronger, but athleticism wise, I think Dwight Howard had him in terms of just like jumping ability. But that's an interesting question. Will he survive in the 90s? It's probably a 50-50. I think he'll survive, but his prime, which was like you said, top 2009 to 2011, might not have been as good. Probably wouldn't. Yeah.
Or maybe he puts up similar numbers, but like I said, there's no way he stands out. So that's my thing about Dwight is he had a hell of a prime during the 2009-2011 run, and we're talking about him versus Embiid. Obviously, it was a better run, right, than what Embiid's done so far. But if you have Dwight, we never saw Dwight with as much confidence position. So if he plays in the 90s, where the game is more sad, that's the golden era of big men. Like I said, I mentioned about 4 guys there. Does he stand out as much? And how many all-time conversations does he really make? Does he make any if he's in the 90s? So that's the only thing about Dwight is I feel like we look at him a little bit differently if he played it in an era where there was a little bit more confidence position. Like he caught Yao Ming kind of his best years came kind of on the back end of Yao's best years. He caught Shaq on the back end of his career.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's Tim Duncan and KG, but those are kind of powerful.
Yeah, Yao Ming I think he was out of the league by the time.
He was in, but he was kind of phased out. Like he had a couple of good years, but he wasn't, So there was no second. The gap between Dwight and the rest of the big men in the NBA at that time was really large, right? And it wasn't that he was so much better than a lot of them, but if this makes sense, it wasn't that he was so much better than a lot of them. There just wasn't as much talent at that big man spot as there was in the 90s, obviously.
Oh yeah, I feel you. I get that.
Yeah. Yep. So, but we're gonna choose you, Dwight Howard. We're gonna get picked. So.
We'll go with Dwight there. And like I said, and another thing about Dwight too is I think a lot of criticisms about his career were, I'm a defend him. Right, people acted like he had no offensive game, and people just acted like he was just this shot blocking. Like for you to be a big man who's leading your team to the finals, and Carl, you always ask this question: is how many big guys right now can actually lead their team to a title or lead their team to a final series? You had to have some level of offensive skill. So sometimes when people say things like, "Oh, Dwight never mastered his post game," he didn't master it, but to act like Dwight just had zero game is the dumbest thing. You act like Dwight had zero game.
Yeah, he had some offensive game. Obviously, if you average 20 points per game in the NBA, you got
some kind of offensive game.
Yeah. Especially, I think people look. That's the thing. If you weren't alive or you didn't catch up on the highlights from the early 2000s or early 2000s, late 2000s or whatever, you're gonna get kind of confused. Like, okay, people in today's league, they average 28 to 30 points, but people back then they only averaged 20 to 25. That's because the defense was simply better. So you have to keep that in mind too. 20 points back then in like 2008, 2009 is equivalent to 27, 28 in my opinion.
Yeah.
Hey, ain't no regular dudes coming off the street averaging almost 30. So.
Yeah.